Welcome to this week's episode. On our last episode, we talked about the number one factor that is at play when it comes to whether or not our kids have friends. And that was the concept of reputation, which is the biggest point of our entire program is the concept of reputation. So if you haven't checked out that episode, I strongly encourage you to go back and check out that one. Today, we're talking about probably the second most important concept in our program. And I want to start by sharing just a little story to illustrate why it matters so much. Our podcast has been around for a little over a year now. We just had our 1-year anniversary. So happy anniversary, podcast. And I don't ever really push asking for reviews or feedback on the podcast, asking people to go rate the podcast, because honestly, it just doesn't, I get people who send emails and make comments about the podcast. And so I guess I just don't really care that much about the likes and all that kind of stuff. It can seem a little gratuitous sometimes. So we only have a handful of reviews on the podcast. One person gave the podcast a 2-star review, which is absolutely fine. One of the big concepts that we have around here is everybody's always entitled to feel the way they feel. You can always feel the way that you feel. It is always okay to not like something. It is always okay to be frustrated, annoyed, disappointed, whatever. It's always okay to feel the way you feel. But in this episode today, I'm going to explain why I have a problem with that 2-star review and why it's one of the things that's at the core of our program here at Starfish. The reason I have a problem with that 2-star review has nothing to do with the fact that it's a 2-star review. It has to do with the fact that that person did not leave us any kind of feedback. None. They just went in and clicked on 2 stars and then moved on. Without feedback, I have no idea what it is about this show that person did not like. I don't know if my voice is super annoying. I don't know if I say the word so way too often because I'm working on that. I'm very aware of it. I don't know if they disagree with our methodology and the things that we talk about. I don't know if they want to hear more from Ramiro and less from me. I have no idea. I don't know if it's because I'm super inconsistent with when I get the episodes out. I have no idea. And so without feedback, there's nothing I can do to address why that person gave us a 2-star review, because I just have no idea. So there's nothing I can do about it. I can't, if there was something specific that person didn't like, I have no way to change it or to say it differently. Or if there were topics that they thought we would talk about that we haven't, there's just nothing I can do with that information. Our topic today is feedback. That's what we're talking about today. Here at Starfish Social Club, we teach all of our students to give each other social feedback. Because here's what happens in non-Starfish environments, mainly at school, but also possibly at home with siblings or even with parents. When our kiddos do things that are maybe socially awkward, socially inappropriate, socially unexpected, let's just take school as the primary example, because that's where our kids spend most of their social time. Other kids have 2 responses when our kids do things that maybe give them a reputation for being annoying or awkward or weird or mean. Other kids either give them no feedback, meaning they don't say anything. And so our kids have no way to know that has affected their reputation. Or other kids give them negative feedback, like telling them they're annoying, telling them to stop it, not being willing to play with them, actively avoiding them, saying things about them to other kids, right? So all these ways that our kids can get negative feedback, but neither one of those, no feedback or negative feedback, neither one of those help our kids understand what they said or did that is causing their reputation to be what it is. And this is why what we talked about on the last episode, kids recognizing they have a reputation for being annoying, but don't know why and don't know how to change it because they're not getting social feedback that's helpful. And so there's no way, it's like the 2-star podcast review. It's like other kids coming along and saying, 1 star, 2 stars, I don't like you, you're annoying. But why? There's no way for our kids to change or do something different if they don't know why. And it's like, if I were to come to Ramiro and say, hey, Ramiro, I need you to teach that class differently. I don't like the way that you're teaching that class. Do it differently. What is he supposed to do with that? Right? If somebody says, yeah, we don't like Starfish, we're going to leave. Okay, but why? What are we supposed to do with that? And, even, Ramiro and I talk about dating sometimes, especially me. But the concept of ghosting another person, I actually really wish that in dating, you were required to give people feedback. Because it's frustrating. I definitely will do that if I'm the one deciding not to see somebody again, is I will, in a very kind, supportive way. And usually it actually happened today. Our personalities just aren't the best match. And so that's what I said, right? He's a cool dude. Our personalities just aren't the best match. Sometimes it's, because of distance. I'm not willing to, put in that kind of distance. Sometimes something that somebody said just that's not the way I operate, lifestyles could be different. But when people just ghost or when people just disappear, there's no feedback for anybody to know. And sometimes it has nothing to do with you, right? But it would be helpful to know that. Because let's say that you went on 10 dates, or let's say in the case of our kids, they had 10 social interactions. And out of all 10 of them, nobody gave them any social feedback, but none of those 10 kids wanted to play with them again the next time. What the heck? I mean, how are they ever supposed to know what they could possibly do differently if they chose to? And even if, the example of the negative feedback, I don't want to play with you, or I don't want to see you again, or don't teach the class like that. There has to be an alternative to that. If we just tell our kids, don't say that, don't do that, we don't play the game that way, whatever, there has to be an alternative for them to know what to do instead. So I think sometimes we get kind of caught up in maybe thinking our kids are too old to be acting a certain way, or they should know something by now, but clearly they don't, right? None of us want a reputation for being annoying. None of us want a reputation for being that person that nobody wants to hang out with or play with. So our kids are missing skills that help bridge those relationships. And if they're just getting negative feedback or no feedback, it is impossible for them to develop skills. Actually, I have another example of this. So I'm on Duolingo, the language app. I'm actually working on 3 different languages right now. I'm at various stages of each one of them. But on Duolingo, the frustrating thing for me about Duolingo, if anybody's listening and you work for Duolingo, here's your helpful feedback. Duolingo doesn't actually teach you why things are the way they are. It teaches you how to say things, and then you just learn, you memorize it through repetition. So it teaches you, genders and articles and tenses and that kind of thing. And you just learn what the pattern is. So, for example, I learned a new way to say something in one of the languages the other day, but it didn't explain to me why you say it that way. And so I don't understand why it's that way. And so later, there's even one of my languages I'm learning is Dutch. And there's something about the adjectives I have never figured out. And so basically every time that's one of my questions, I just guess because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but it's always just a guess. Whereas if they would just come in and say, this is the rule for this adjective, right? They just keep giving me negative feedback. They just keep wrong, 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 but I don't know why.
Yeah.
And so that's been really frustrating for me through Duolingo is the feedback. You get negative feedback when you get something wrong, but there's not helpful feedback that follows it. They don't tell you what was wrong about it or why it's supposed to be a different way. You just learn to quit doing it wrong, but you could try 17 different ways of what you think may be right before you finally get it right, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So yeah, again, that's my helpful feedback for Duolingo is they don't actually teach the rules of the languages. So again, I'm in 3 of them. I mean, I've been doing this for a while. They don't actually teach you the rules. They just teach pattern recognition. And so I've gotten really good at pattern recognition. I've learned a lot in all 3 of these languages, but there's some things that I still don't understand and don't know. And if I were to be in a conversation where things were a little bit different than they are on Duolingo, like, a natural conversation, I don't know that I would be speaking correctly. So that's my spiel about the challenge our kiddos have when they want to change their reputation is that it requires helpful feedback. And most of the time, our kids are not getting helpful feedback. That's one of the big things we teach everybody to do here is give each other helpful feedback because we're all here to help each other and we're all learning the same stuff. We all have a lot of shared experiences. We're going through similar things. So these kids are the best kids to be able to give each other helpful feedback. And we have a few different criteria for who and when and how we can give each other feedback, because we definitely have students sometimes who want to call everybody out. We talked about that a little bit on the last episode too, about wanting to correct everybody all the time. And we have some students on the other end who will just let things go. So we definitely have some certain criteria for who and when and how we can give feedback. So Ramiro, do you want to elaborate on any of that?
Yeah. So the way we break it down is into like 3 different categories as to why we would give someone feedback or why our students should give someone else feedback. And those are, we would want to give feedback if someone is going to hurt themselves. So for example, if a student is running around one of the rooms and they're about to hit their head on a table or like hit their head somewhere, so another student would give them feedback and say, hey, like slow down, you're about to hit your head, or slow down, you're about to run into those games, or hey, you're about to run into those students. Um, they'll give them feedback to make sure that that person doesn't hurt themselves. So that is helpful feedback. They're not getting mad at them by saying, hey, stop that, or hey, don't do that. They're saying, hey, slow down, or you're going to hurt yourself. Um, so that's one reason. The second reason that we would give someone feedback is if someone is going to hurt other people. Or I guess I kind of blended those 2 together. But so in this case, if a student is going to, like if a student is backing up and they're about to trip over another student who's playing on the floor behind them in a different group, then hopefully a student would give them feedback and say, hey, watch out, you're about to run into them. Or like I guess like
Well, even from a like a verbal or emotional perspective, right? If somebody's saying something that another person finds offensive or disrespectful,
yeah,
so yeah, it could even be hurting another person in a non-physical way. But
yeah,
yeah, just saying something that that another student might find disrespectful or hurtful.
yeah, absolutely. And so the third reason why we would give someone feedback is if someone is doing something that is hurting their reputation, or affecting their reputation. So if a student is, like how we mentioned in the last episode, if a student is saying the same joke over and over and over again, a student can give them feedback and say, hey, you already said that joke more than once, and it's kind of not funny anymore. So, can you say another joke, or can you please stop saying that joke? Um, we teach a lot about like how we give feedback because depending on the tone of voice that you use, depending on the like the verbiage that you use or like how you say something, it can be the difference between helpful feedback or aggressive or just negative feedback in general. Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And that's we have a whole lesson in our first module about giving people feedback. And it actually we turned it into kind of a game. So we let all the students practice giving aggressive feedback, right? Which is if we're yelling, if we're being disrespectful. And so they really like practicing that. But we also talk about how we've all done that before. We have all given somebody aggressive feedback before. And usually it's when we've let something go too long and not given feedback. And so it gets to the point where we're just done. And now we're raising our voice or we're being disrespectful, we're calling names, we're doing something. We even talk about please, but if you say, please stop doing that, right? Now that falls under aggressive feedback. So yeah, we teach all the kids how to give each other helpful social feedback, just like Ramiro was saying, but that's the criteria, right? That it's got to fall under one of those three situations. So we don't give people feedback just because we think they're annoying. We don't give people feedback just because we're bothered by something they're saying or doing. It's got to be because we notice that they're in danger of harming their reputation. And so along with that, we point out that we want to pay attention to feedback if we're getting it from more than one person. Because if it's just one person, that might be that person's problem. If there's just one person who's telling you that you're annoying or you're rude or your jokes aren't funny, but nobody else is saying that, that just may be that person, right? So we don't always have to pay attention to feedback if there's just one person saying it. We also don't always have to pay attention to feedback if it comes from people that don't care about us. A great example of this is feedback from people in the world. So even a couple of years ago, one time in Starfish's history, I ran Facebook ads for something that I was doing a few years ago. I have a unibrow because I just don't care. Whatever. And so on my Facebook ads, it was a video of me and somebody commented on the Facebook ad, clearly not a Facebook family, just it was ads to the public, and said, you need to shave your unibrow. You look like Tom Selleck, which first of all, it is not that significant.
I would have never noticed. Honestly.
Yeah. I actually did not even care about that comment. It did not bother me at all. The part that bothered me about it was that our target audience is women and this was a dude. And so there was something wrong with our ads because that guy should not have even seen the ad in the first place. That's what bothered me about it. I was like, no, he's not even our audience. But getting a comment like that from one person who has no relationship to me, just a troll on the internet, meant absolutely nothing to me. I did not care. I've actually never had anybody else even say anything about my eyebrows.
I believe it.
So yeah, it did not faze me at all. If it would have been someone whom I know personally or someone that I care about what they think, then I might have had a different, a different thought about it. But some rando on the internet, definitely not someone to invest. And the same, in Facebook groups, sometimes if you post something in a group and people have a negative reaction to it, or, it's easy for people to kind of target and come at people for things that they post online. I've even had that happen to me when I was just asking a question about something or just asking for help with something. But again, if these aren't people that it doesn't really matter what they think, unless, of course, you're getting the feedback repeatedly. And then that might be something to think about, right? If you're having multiple people tell you similar things. But yeah, so that's the criteria we have for the kids too. We also teach them that if there's somebody that they don't really get along with, they should not give that person social feedback, because it's really hard to give social feedback to someone that you don't get along with or that doesn't like you and have it come across as helpful. It just doesn't really work that way. So what we teach the kids to do is let other people give that feedback. It could be a teacher, it could be other students, it could be that person's parents. But if you don't get along with that person, just let it go, because it's really hard to make that feedback sound helpful when you guys don't have a good relationship.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, there's one time where I had been seeing somebody and let them know that I wasn't interested in seeing them again. And he sent me this really long text message with all of my flaws. Like just a list of all the reasons why he knew this wouldn't work, which was, first of all, it was humorous because I'm the one who said I didn't want to see him again, right? So it was, but it also, I read it just to see if there was something in there that maybe I'd heard before, right? So is there something that's a repeat quality of mine, or, do I have any repeat offending behaviors? But it wasn't. I mean, it was just kind of lame, stupid stuff that he was saying in this message. So again, I read it. I did not take anything out of it that I felt like was helpful or valuable, and I deleted it and I moved on. Right. And he's also, now we are two people who don't get along. I mean, now that he's kind of attacked me like that via text message, I do not respect the feedback that he's trying to give me, because it's coming from a place of him being upset. Right. It's not coming from a place of him trying to be helpful. So I'm trying not to say the word so. All right, that's my feedback to myself. I don't know where that word came from, but it has embedded itself in my mouth, and it just comes out so often. On the concept of feedback, it's really interesting and amazing to see how quickly our kids pick up on being able to give other people feedback.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about it in a lot of our past episodes, but it comes up. It's really cool when we have kids who have more low-key personalities and they learn to give feedback to other kids who may be a little more dominating. That's really cool because they learn to self-advocate. So I know we've told stories about kids at game time and being able to say to another student, hey, you've gone first the last 3 times, or you always pick the game. Can I pick the game this time? Right? Just being able to give more assertive kids helpful feedback, because sometimes we just choose not to. And we'll even hear kids say, no, it's okay. It's okay. I don't mind. It's okay. But it's not.
Yeah.
Right? It's not okay that you haven't gone first 3 times in a row. It's not okay that you don't ever get to pick the game. And so kids recognize that it is safe for them to give other people feedback. And the role that Ramiro and I play is, if a kiddo comes to us with something, we will say something like, what would you like to say to them? Or have you given them feedback already? So we'll put it back on them. And then if we notice that they have tried and it's not working, that's when we'll step in. But even then we'll say something like, I noticed that she's asked you to stop tapping her chair 3 times already. And you just say it like that. So again, we don't ever come and say, stop tapping her chair, right? I noticed that she's already asked you to stop 3 times. Or the example that Ramiro gave, I noticed that nobody else is laughing at the joke that you've said for the last 3 weeks now. We have a student who will sometimes talk, the group will be just talking, and he'll start talking about something that nobody's talking about and that he's been stuck on for weeks. And so the feedback is, I noticed that no one else is talking about that. Right.
Yeah.
So again, it's not saying, hey, stop talking about that, because it's his choice. He can keep talking about it if he wants to, but it's helping him recognize that that's probably not giving him the best reputation when he's talking about things that no one else is talking about. Trying to think of other specific examples of kids giving each other. Oh, even sometimes in our classes, there's some kids that start having side conversations, mainly our elementary groups. They'll start having side conversations, and some of the other kids get annoyed by that. And so they will say, can we please get back to the lesson?
Yeah.
Or will you please let Ramiro talk? Or, something like that. But we also, in our feedback lesson, we let them practice whining, right? Stop it.
Oh
Like,
my God.
Yeah. Oh man, we have to let them practice. We have to let them get it out of their system. So we practice that too, that's not helpful feedback, right? When you have that whiny, sing-songy voice, when you're complaining about something, that's not helpful feedback. And then the flip side of that, obviously, is their ability to receive feedback, which is a whole nother lesson that we have in module 1. So giving feedback is one lesson, and receiving feedback is another lesson, because nobody likes to receive feedback. We're all out here doing the darn best that we can, getting through this life of ours. And so nobody likes for someone to point out something that we're doing that's annoying or rude or whatever. But being able to receive feedback is a really important skill socially, but also just in life, right? In a job situation, in a relationship. Really anything, we need to be able to receive feedback from other people. So we have a lesson on giving feedback and a lesson on receiving feedback. And then we teach all of our kids how to do that. And we expect them to be able to do that with each other. And it works really well. I'm really proud of how much our kids internalize that and take that on and give each other helpful feedback. All right. Anything else that you want to share about feedback before we wrap this one up? This actually might be one of our shorter episodes. Oh my goodness. I remember when I always look at when we stop, we don't have a timer or anything. And when we stop, we always, oh my gosh, 40 minutes or an hour. It's just me rambling the whole time. So anything else about feedback?
I don't think so. I mean, it's very interesting how it really is such an important aspect, no matter who our students are, no matter, like their exact like social engagements or whatever it could be. It's very important, because if we go through and like if we're only telling our students like, no, don't do that, or hey, stop that, or whatever, like Steph said, like they're just learning a pattern, but they're not understanding why. And so if someone challenges that, or if they, if it's just, if it's not understood, then they're never going to know how to properly like process through situations, or like really learn. I don't even, I feel like my brain is going like 100 different directions now, just like how in depth this can go with feedback. I guess like overall,
it's like the Duolingo situation. You're just trying different things, but not ever really knowing what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. And so even students who come to game time before they start their lessons, they're already learning about what feedback is, whether students are giving it to them or they want to give someone else feedback. That's always something that I'm talking about to new students. That's something that Steph is always going through with new students, even before they're involved with our lessons. So, regardless of, where our students are in life or in their, in school or wherever it might be, yeah, giving feedback and receiving feedback is one of the most important things. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's, our kids here are all different ages. We have students 7 through 21 is the age group that we enroll. And then once students are in our program, they can stay as long as they want to. So we have some students that are older than 21 because they've been here for several years. And so we have, I know I told a story in a different episode about one of our elementary kids giving one of our high school kids feedback, right? Because it has nothing to do with how old they are. There's really no social hierarchy here.
Right.
But also, one of the things about our population here is we are only neurodivergent students. We don't have neurotypical kids here. And so I think that's a huge factor too, is you're getting feedback from other people who you have shared experiences with, you have similarities with. Even there's been a few times where I specifically remember probably about 4 years ago, a student had come in and had a reputation for being really annoying and was bothering other people in the group. He was middle school, and the other kids were giving him feedback, and he said, "Well, I can't help it. I'm autistic." And you hear, "Me too. So am I. I am too." Right. And almost everybody in the group pipes up because most of our students at Starfish Social Club are autistic. And it was just interesting to see him because I think he's used to being the only autistic person. And so he could use that as like a crutch, right? I think he was tapping the table or doing something, making noises, something. And so once all the other students chimed in, it's like he realized that that was no longer a valid thing to say because most of the people here are autistic, and we can still take feedback from other people and make a change to help our reputation. And it came up again a couple of weeks ago in one of our groups too. One of the students, we're talking about we started just having a conversation in the group from things that kids had said, and she brought up emotional regulation, that she feels like she struggles with regulating her emotions. And she said, "I think it's because I'm autistic." And then we started talking about how I said, "Raise your hand if you're autistic." And in that particular group, it was everybody in that group. And so we talked about how being autistic can make emotional regulation more challenging for sure, but it's not challenging for everybody who's autistic. So it is something that we can work on and that we can improve on if we choose to. But I think that's another factor is Ramiro and I try to give the least amount of feedback possible because we are not the kids' peers. They're each other's peers. And so their feedback is much more valuable than our feedback. It's the same with parents, right? So, peer feedback is the most valuable. And then Ramiro and I, our feedback tends to be more valuable than parent feedback, but it's because you are their parent, right? And so they think that you say things sometimes just because you're their parent. And so Ramiro and I can say the exact same thing that you probably have been saying for 3 years, but it lands better when we say it because we just have a different relationship with the kids. But peer feedback is absolutely the most valuable form of feedback as long as it's done in a helpful manner. I really wish that I could find a way to teach kids everywhere how to give each other feedback. I wish we could teach this lesson in like classrooms all over the world so that kids could give our kids helpful, beneficial feedback. I also think sometimes neurotypical kids think that it's mean if they give our kids feedback.
Yeah.
Because you'll hear like, "That's Joey, that's just the way that he is." But it doesn't have to be, right? So I think sometimes neurotypical kids think that it's mean for them to give our kids feedback. But mainly I think they just don't know how to do it in a helpful way.
Right.
They just don't know how. A lot of peer programs that are set up in schools where maybe kids with neurodiversities or special needs have quote unquote peer mentors. Nobody's teaching those peer mentors how to give our kids feedback. And so there's a lot of tolerating that goes on. There's a lot of things that our kids are doing that if someone in that capacity could just say, hey, the other kids feel frustrated when you do that, or feel annoyed when you do that, that would be so incredibly helpful. But some of our kids go 8, 10, 18 years with nobody ever having told them that that thing that they're doing or saying is actually a problem. Especially, I can think of in my former life, I worked with a student who is a local celebrity. And she at the time was late teens and had these things that she would do that she'd clearly been doing since she was little. Her language skills were not very strong. And so when I first met her, I would say things like, oh, that makes me feel uncomfortable when you do that. And some people in her world were really offended by me saying that. Luckily, her mother was not. Her mother appreciated me being upfront about that. And then we were able to communicate that to other people in her world, that that's actually a really socially inappropriate thing for a 17-year-old to be doing. Right. And so it's cute because she's been doing it since she was 3 and everybody loves her because she's a local celebrity, but it's actually a really awkward thing for someone her age to be doing. So our kids get that sometimes too. They have things that they have said or done since they were little. And at some point, it's just no longer age appropriate, but nobody gives them feedback about it. Even things like we talk about giving teachers full-on hugs. There's an age at which that's just not really socially appropriate anymore. We can do side hugs, we can do fist bumps, we can do high fives. We've had a student in the past who would tell other people, I love you, right? It's really adorable when you're little. It's weird when you're not little anymore. So even just thinking about things like that, that can really affect our students' reputation, right? But nobody's giving them helpful feedback about it. That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. We are here to teach our kids how to do that and teach our kids how to receive feedback. And so hopefully they're planting those seeds out into the world. And even sometimes when our kids will talk about situations that happen at school, we'll say, what did you tell them? Or what did you do when that happened? Or what did you say? And I'm always really interested to hear if they chose to give that person feedback. Yeah. Because here it's just the way that we operate. I mean, it's very ingrained into our system here. But obviously out in the world, it's not. I think most people are actually avoidant when it comes to giving other people feedback. Most people would prefer to ghost or prefer to just put up with it or prefer to complain to other people about it as opposed to just saying something to that person. Yeah. Okay. I promised that we were almost done with this episode and that was like 20 minutes ago. Anything else that you want to share? And we really will wrap it up this time.
I don't think so. I think, it's a very good conversation, very good lesson for everyone to learn, even for us to learn, for anyone to learn, really. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So last episode was the number one most important thing when it comes to our kids and their ability to make friends, and that is their reputation, which is a cornerstone of our program. Today was about being able to give and receive feedback, which I would say is number 2, the number 2 most important thing in our program. And so on the next episode, if we can be predictable, usually I'm totally random, but these are actually following a predictable sequence. On the next episode, we're going to talk about the third thing that really makes our program unique and dynamic and a really great resource for our students. So we'll see you guys next time.